Dr. Mindy here, and on this video, I'm going to expand on this idea around what the heck do we do with belly fat. So I specifically want to dive into food. I know I talk a lot about fasting, but it's time for us to talk about foods and how to pair those fasts with really good foods that will help you get rid of the belly fat. Okay, so belly fat. This is like a really common question that we get a lot from you guys. And I really want to dial it in and give you some specific things that you can apply today. But before I do that, I really want to explain, like, what is fat? Why does it accumulate at the belly? Why do we accumulate fat in general? And then I'm going to go into 3 specific food groups that you've got to incorporate and understand why you're incorporating them so we can finally get rid of this belly fat. So here's the first concept. I really cannot say this enough that I want us to stop villainizing fat, because there is a reason that your body is accumulating fat, and it's because it needs a storage spot for the excess. So the excess hormones, the excess toxins, the excess glucose. So when your body accumulates fat around parts of that you don't like, especially the belly, we have to stop and remember that the body's giving us a message. So how do we go after that excess? And how do we stop villainizing fat? That's another really key point. Stop looking at yourself in the mirror and telling yourself horrible things when your body was trying to save your freaking life. So let's have more of an appreciation of, like, wow, the body's doing the right thing at the right time. Thank you, body. Now I want to unwind that and make sure you don't have to store fat anymore. So there are 3 things I want you to think about. The first is that we've got to look at what the major organ that helps us detoxify. Because if we are storing extra toxins and fat, let's dive into the most important organ in the body for detoxification, and that's the liver. Now, when we look at the liver, we have a very specific category of foods the liver needs you to feed it so that it can do its detoxification properly. And we call those bitter foods. And this always kind of leaves people in this quandary of, like, well, what is a bitter food? So I'm going to give you some of my favorite. And this is literally my most favorite. I've eaten this a couple times this week, and it is radicchio. And I actually will use radicchio to wrap it around meat. So I'll put a burger in it. It becomes my bun for on the days I'm going low carb. I'll wrap it around some turkey slices with some grass-fed cheese and eat it like a little wrap. It is so firm that it actually works a lot like bread, and the liver loves it. So radicchio is a phenomenal option. The other option, and I put this in my salads all the time, actually did this last night, is dandelion greens. You've probably heard of dandelion green tea. I like to just get the fiber itself, so I like to go to the actual dandelion green itself. And what I'll do, for those of you who are like, well, what do I do with a dandelion green, is that I actually will take the green and I will cut it up. I'll take some scissors, or I'll chop it with a knife, and I'll cut it up and put it in a mixed salad. So last night, we actually had a mixed green salad with dandelion greens, radicchio, and some other mixed greens. I threw some mint into it. We had a grass-fed steak and a sweet potato, and it was like perfection on a plate. But it really was there was a healing aspect to that meal other than a taste aspect. And dandelion greens were a really important part of that to help support liver health. Outside of things like radicchio and dandelion greens, my next favorite bitter food is ginger. I am a huge fan of fresh pressed ginger. I have been known to walk into a health store and just grab one of those ginger shots and drink it. You can press it yourself. You can put this in tea. You can cut it up and put it in a smoothie. That would be a beautiful way to do it, but it's great support for the liver. Outside of that, we've got lemons are also really great. I mean, we can even look at things like coffee, where coffee is a bitter. If you're doing it clean coffee, that can be supportive of the liver. Talked a lot on this channel about the importance of coffee enemas. Well, what does coffee do? Coffee dilates. And so when we're looking to open up the liver so it can get all those toxins out and it doesn't forward it on to the belly to store it as fat, then we want to lean into, some clean coffee. This is not your coffee you go get at your coffee shop unless it's an organic one. This is organic, without chemicals, without mold. That's the kind of coffee you want. I've got a bunch on my website if you want to go look at my favorite. And then the other one that I recently have been dabbling with, I know we got a lot of chefs here on this channel, is something like cranberries. But this isn't like cranberry juice or a dried cranberry where we add sugar to it. This is like a cranberry that you, again, would take an organic cranberry, throw it into a smoothie. It's going to be a little tart, but it's also going to be very supportive of the liver. So those are some of my favorites that I've used personally for bitter foods. But overall, to support the liver and reduce the belly fat, we want the bitter foods. Second concept, and this one's really important for you to get. So what controls blood sugar is our microbiome. So we need to feed the microbes in our gut and make sure we have a really diverse set of microbes so that we can regulate blood sugar. If we've been on antibiotics for a long time, if you've been on decades of birth control, if you've had a lot of steroid use, what you're going to see, and you've been under a lot of stress, what you're going to see is your microbiome is deficient of a good variety of microbes. And you may find that your blood sugar is higher than you want it to be. When I'm working with a patient one-on-one, when I can't get blood sugar down, I go to the liver and I go to the gut to be able to look at how do we regulate blood sugar from that angle as opposed to just looking at fasting, which I love, of course, and looking at supplementation. I know a lot of you have asked me about like cinnamon and things like that. But what I want you to do is start to put some of these hacks I'm giving you into a daily regime that works really well. So when we go to the gut, I have some very clear, tried and true ones. The first is bone broth. Now, I want to explain why bone broth works so well. It has something called glycine in it, and glycine will heal the inner lining of your gut. And it will prevent, it can actually stop a leaky gut. So one of my favorite gut hacks is to fast up to 24 hours. I wrote about that in Fast Like a Girl, and then break your fast with bone broth. Now we've actually started to heal the gut in one day. It only takes, by the way, 3 days of consistent, good eating, good fasting to change that microbiome. So can you add more bone broth in, especially when you go to break your fast? Second piece is that we've got to look at something, well, I'll go here for next. We've got to look at some of the probiotic foods that we want to add in. So raw kefir is one of my favorite because it has trillions of good bacteria. I love Raw Farm. I have no financial ties to them. I just love them as humans, and they're on a mission to try to change the microbiome of the world through raw dairy. And this one has turmeric in it. It has some cinnamon, so it can help with that blood sugar coming down, but it's also got trillions of bacteria, more powerful than even a probiotic. I break my fast often with this. And then the last part of the microbiome, especially for women, that I want to talk about is the power of the estrobolome. Now, this is a set of bacteria in your gut that break estrogen down. If we go back to what I said in the beginning of this video, the reason that we accumulate fat, especially around the belly, is because of excess. So one of those excesses is estrogen. You've got to have a good microbiome to break estrogen down. Otherwise, your body stores it as fat, especially belly fat. So are you eating enough green leafy vegetables? So parsley is always in my refrigerator. I cut this up and put it in salads almost every day. Outside of that, I like to get anywhere between 4 and 8 cups of green leafy vegetables a day. When I make a salad, I put mixed greens in it. I put parsley, I put mint, I put radicchio, I put dandelion greens. So I try to use a salad as my tool, my healing tool, to be able to support my liver and my microbiome. That combination now has my liver detoxifying the bad estrogens, and it has me breaking those bad estrogens down and the good estrogens down so the good can be used and the bad can go away. This is the level of nuance that we need to start talking about when we're looking at something as simple as belly fat, we've got to break down how you can get rid of that and understand it from a deeper level, because your body is always doing the right thing at the right time. Last thing I want to tell you, when we look at blood sugar, we want to look at stability. And if your blood sugar is doing this all day long, what happens is in those peaks of glucose, you're also getting a peak of insulin. And as many people are moving more towards insulin resistance, what happens is that we're starting to see that the body doesn't know how to even stabilize something as simple as a sweet potato, my favorite carbohydrate on the planet. So putting our carbs with a fat slows down the spike of blood sugar, which is a brilliant thing. So grass-fed butter goes on everything I can possibly put on it. I also add avocado to almost everything that I eat. The salad I talked about that I made last night had a whole avocado in it. Many of you have commented on the recipe in Fast Like a Girl, where I show you how to break your fast with avocado and sauerkraut. But when you add a fat into every single meal, you are stabilizing your blood sugar. When you stabilize your blood sugar, you're not getting these big spikes and these big crashes. When you don't have the big spike, there's no glucose to store. There's nothing to store. There's no insulin to store. When you're cleaning up the liver, the liver's detoxifying in a normal, healthy way. There's nothing to store. When we start to add in some really smart microbiome repair foods, like I spoke of, you're regulating your blood sugar, and now you don't have that glucose and insulin at high levels. So there's nothing to store. That's the trick. Like, I want you to see this so clearly, that the art to losing weight exists in fasting and food. Yes, movement's going to help. I love movement. You won't ever hear me say don't exercise, don't move. But what I want you to understand is stop saying mean things to yourself. Stop villainizing the fat. It just needs you to treat it a different way. And this is how it wants you to eat. Believe it or not, on my Resetter podcast, the most popular podcast we have done is one that I talk about when people struggle to lose weight, what they should do. So I get it, and I want to help you. I'm trying to give you all my hacks. And there's one discussion we haven't had that is really important to talk about, which is the best time to lose weight and burn belly fat is when you're sleeping. I'm not joking. Like, literally, when you sleep, you burn fat. And if you don't do the 8 things that I'm talking about right now, you may be missing out on this fat burning opportunity. So let's dive in. The way that I think about this is when we wake up in the morning, we should wake up slow. You are moving out of a delta brainwave where your brain is like coming back online, and you're going to move through delta, theta, alpha until you get into a beta brainwave state where you're actually communicating with people. So getting up should be gentle, and the same thing should be happening at the end of the day. And the same thing happens at night if all of a sudden you're like going, maybe you put the kids to bed and then you go back to work, you start answering emails, maybe you have a stressful conversation with your spouse, and then you put your head on the pillow, you're still in this high alert beta state. So you're not going to burn fat at night if you're in that high alert beta state, and you're definitely going to impact your fat burning capabilities in your fasting window if you wake up in that jolted, I call it the rushing woman, state in the morning. Let's change those 2 moments of the day. Now, this video, I really want to talk about the night one because this is important. So the first thing, your timing of your food really matters. And there's a couple of general rules with timing of food when it comes to weight loss. And if you haven't heard me say this before, I'm going to say it right now. When melatonin goes up, you become more insulin resistant. So when you're eating at 8 and 9 o'clock at night, when it's dark out, melatonin's going up. So that meal, your body is not going to be able to make the insulin to drive glucose into the cell. So that glucose from your meal is going to get stored as fat. So one of the really interesting hacks is just don't eat in the dark. Like, eat when it's light out because melatonin production is down. But a general rule that I use for myself is I don't eat 2 hours before going to bed. When I do eat every once in a while, like if I'm traveling or family, we all sit down very late sometimes, then I hate that because I can see it on my Oura ring that my deep sleep, my REM sleep, my whole sleep goes off. But again, we're not looking at sleep as this fat burning tool. So stop eating 2 hours before you go to bed. And in that, let's try to eat in the light, not in the dark. Okay, second thing that you can do is always, always, always take a walk after dinner. This is really important because think about what a lot of us do is maybe we had a stressed out day, we sit down, we eat dinner, maybe we're on our phone while we're eating dinner, maybe we're watching TV while we're eating dinner, which you shouldn't be doing. And we're just staying in this cortisol saturated state. And so when cortisol is high, you become insulin resistant. So what we can do to break that pattern is we eat a meal and then we go for a walk. And what that does is it uses the glucose we just ate and it moves it into the muscles so that the muscles can start to use it for energy. The glucose that isn't used gets stored as fat. So if you eat your meal, you sit down, watch TV, and then you plop into bed, now, none of that glucose potentially got used and it's going to be stored as fat. Third thing, you've got to put yourself in a parasympathetic state before you go to bed. So just like when we wake up in the morning, we go from delta, theta, alpha, beta, like right now, I'm in beta, you're in beta listening to me. This is the high alert state of our brain. You don't want to be in a high alert state of your brain when you go to sleep. You got to start to go into that alpha and theta place. So what can you do to increase your parasympathetic activity? Well, meditation is really good. My fourth and fifth idea for you is to actually do some yoga. I know many people that will do some sun salutations when right before they go to bed. I personally, lately, I've been doing a breathwork app. So my new favorite breathwork app, I don't have any financial backing or reason to tell you this other than I freaking love this app, and it's called Othership. And one of my favorite things to do is a yoga nidra meditation, which is really cool because what it does is it takes your awareness out of your problems from the day, and it puts your awareness in different parts of your body, and it starts to move you into more of that alpha and theta state so you can get into a deeper rest. Now, part of getting into a parasympathetic state means not watching TV before you go to bed. But I think it's kind of habit that we do to watch TV before we go to bed. So I can tell you one thing that I've learned that I do that works for me, may work for you, may not. My new favorite thing to do before I go to bed is to watch like a stand-up comedian. There's so many great ones on Netflix or a lot of the different channels that I just like to laugh before I go to bed. I find that the seriousness of the day keeps me in that high alert beta state. And the minute I go into laughter, I increase oxytocin. And when I increase oxytocin, I decrease cortisol. And when I decrease cortisol, I'm going to make myself more insulin sensitive, but I'm also going to be able to go into sleep a little easier. I'm going to get more rest out of my sleep. When I get more rest out of my sleep, I'm going to burn more fat. I can also tell you that we have a rule in my house, no stressful conversations before I go to bed. One of the things that my husband used to do, and I stop him every time now, is that I'll often say, hey, good night, going to bed. And then he wants to talk about what we're doing the next day. Okay, I got this, I got that. And I've now said, nope, we'll talk about it in the morning, because I have a whole process that I do to start to wind myself down. Okay, you know how when you're trying to get in and out of fat burner, sugar burner, and sometimes you struggle? It might be that you have a metabolic blocker that's at play here. Want to know what those blockers are? Click on the link below and I'll take you straight to a giveaway and you can have my list of metabolic blockers. Sixth thing I want to tell you, and this one's really interesting. I've thought a lot about this, and that is make sure your room is cool. Now, there's a lot of research showing that when we get into bed, that what can end up happening is if our mattress is cool, if the room is cool, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. This is a little bit like cold plunges where, you pop in a cold plunge and you come out and you feel calmer. You might not have felt that calm when you're in the plunge, but you will feel calmer afterwards. When we put ourselves in cool environments, what we end up doing is we turn on that parasympathetic activity. So, if it's summertime, it's really hot, take a very, very cold shower and then get in bed. Sometimes I'll do that with when you got curly hair. A lot of times going to bed with wet hair is a trick for making the curls come out a little bit more. So I'll take a real cold shower at night before I go to bed and go to sleep with a wet head, wake up with a big head of curls, and I've gotten into a deeper sleep and I've burned more belly fat as I've been sleeping. Okay, the seventh thing is a weighted blanket. Now, this is really interesting because I've spoken of this before. Like, if we go back, I'm always thinking through the lens of like our primal friends and like, how did we do it? You know, the world got so complicated. The modern world's so complicated. We have all these problems now. What in the modern world is working in opposition of what we did in our primal days? And when we think about what we did in our primal days, slept on a cold, hard ground, and didn't have mattresses, and they used cow hides as most likely as a cover, as a blanket. So there's something about our nervous system relaxing and going into a deeper sleep when we decide to sleep on a cold mattress and use a weighted blanket. I can tell you, I travel a lot, and when I go into hotel rooms, I actually will take my pillows and put the pillows on top of me to kind of give me that calm feeling that will put me into a deeper sleep. Okay, last thing, and this one's really cool if you have the resources to do it, and that is to really monitor your sleep, whether it's, you know, through some kind of biometric wearable. There are a lot of great ones out there, but start to monitor your sleep. And what's interesting is that we've kind of gotten caught in this part of, oh, we need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. But if you actually look into the research, there are a lot of studies showing us that there's a first sleep and a second sleep. And those of us that wake up at 3 and 4 in the morning, that sometimes we can sit there. I know this happens to me. So what we know is that if we monitor our sleep, and we make sure that we're not just falling prey to, oh, I got 7 hours, oh, I got 6 hours, and getting caught in how many hours we're getting, but actually thinking more about two measurements. We want to think about deep sleep and we want to think about REM sleep. So deep sleep is where your brain actually starts to shrink and your cerebral spinal fluid comes up and it washes your brain out and it takes those toxins out and puts it through your lymph system. So you literally have a new, fresh detox brain in the morning. You need at least 60 minutes of deep sleep. 90 minutes is better. I haven't seen any research saying too much deep sleep is bad, but that's usually what we're looking for. REM sleep is how we make sure that we are able to take the information that we learned that day and are able to integrate it into our memory. So it's more about information, which is REM sleep, and cognition. So you need about 60 to 90 minutes of REM sleep. And the last thing I want to say on this that I think is really interesting, and I just did a podcast with Dr. John Lawrence on this, is that there is a part of the brain, and he calls it the blue spot. So you're going to have to go listen to this podcast because is really cool. And he said it's a part of the brain that has taken all of the information from your day, and at night when we go to sleep, it passes it on to our limbic system for integrating into our long-term memory. If we're not going into a deep enough REM sleep, a deep enough deep sleep, then this blue spot of our brain isn't able to turn off and download that information. So you stay in a stressed state. When you're in a stressed state, what's going to end up happening is your cortisol levels will stay high. When your cortisol levels stay high, you accumulate more fat. So sleep, I know it's making a comeback, which is so silly. It should always be there present for us. But there's so many brain patterns that are happening when we sleep. We need to make sure we're getting quality sleep to be able to burn fat. It is your prime burning fat time period, so let's do it right. And I hope these 8 things help.
First study, and I just want to point out for a second, when we look at science, there are several things we have to look at. First, we've got to look at what was it done on an animal? Was it done on a human? If it was done on a human, what's the age ranges of the humans that it was done on? Because gosh, especially with weight loss, if you're going to compare a 19-year-old man to a 59-year-old woman, you can't compare those two. And then the other part of it is you have to look at the journals that they're coming out in and maybe even have to look at who funded the study. I don't typically do that here, telling you who all the people are that are funding it. That takes a lot of time and research, but something to realize is that even though it's science, It's not always an absolute that we all need to follow. And in these articles, I'm going to show you some of the nuances. So the first one was October 2020, and it was put out by the Journal of American Medicine. And this was the title. This is a really interesting one because I had to go through this study a couple of times. It said, this is what they claim, that a randomized controlled trial was done and that intermittent fasting has no significant weight loss benefit and a substantial negative effect on muscle mass. Okay, so I dove into that and I saw there was 141 patients. They didn't say the sex or the age, so couldn't find that, and they all did 16-hour fasts. There were two groups. One group did 16-hour fasting. The other group was all they did is take their snacks out, and they were allowed to eat 3 meals a day. So this is what they were comparing the weight loss and muscle mass effects on. Well, then, and out of those two groups, they came out and said, nah, intermittent fasting doesn't really help you lose weight. But they were just comparing intermittent fasting 16 hours to 3 meals a day. So that was what they were comparing. There were some really big gaps of strategies that probably needed to be implemented in this study. The first is that when these two groups ate, they didn't give them any diet recommendations. They were not given any, you have to eat this exact amount. So you're dealing with one group that had 3 meals a day and could eat whatever they wanted in those meals. And the fasting group was 16 hours. And when they did eat, they could eat whatever they want. So just because fasting is amazing and it helps with so many things, it doesn't mean that it gives you free license to eat whatever you want, especially when it comes to weight loss. So this group, this 3 meals a day, they could have been eating at McDonald's those 3 meals, and this group could have been, doing the same. When they ate, they could have been eating fast food. So we didn't control the foods that they ate. That right there tells me the study, it wasn't really properly done. The second thing is that they didn't control their physical activity. So this group, they could have run a marathon that day, and this group didn't. So we had some big variables that were not analyzed closely enough. They were just looking at intermittent fasting compared to 3 meals a day with no intermittent fasting. The second thing that was really fascinating about this study is that they said that there wasn't any significant difference. Now let's go into the verbiage here, because the title of the claim of JAMA was that there was no significant weight loss benefit, meaning if you did 3 meals a day or you fasted 16 hours, that there was no difference between the two. Well, okay. When I dove in and I looked at it, actually the intermittent fasters lost a lot more weight than the other people. So that seems pretty, they didn't say intermittent fasting wasn't good for weight loss. They just said there was no significant difference. But when we get these headlines, what happens is now somebody reads that headline, they're struggling with fasting, and they're like, oh, see, I shouldn't have fasted. This is exactly why I don't fast. Or you have friends that are like watching your results with fasting, and they're like, oh, I saw an article in JAMA that said there's no weight loss difference. Okay, we didn't go into the nuance of the study, and we got sidetracked by the headline and didn't dive deeper and look at what they were actually measuring. So that's the first thing I want to say. And we're going to get back to the muscle mass here in a second. The second study was Cell Journal, March 2021. So it just came out. And here's the title. I titled this, YouTube this. Intermittent fasting didn't reduce belly fat. Now, this one is done in mice. And here's something they found, and it's so fascinating to me. They found that repetitive fasting over and over and over again would cause you to become more resistant to burning visceral fat. Okay, so visceral fat is fat around your organs. They also feel like visceral fat is belly fat. So the article and the study went on to say that when we fast and we switch into this fat burning mode, the one thing that is not capable of burning fat from fasting is visceral fat. And they go on to even say that repeated bouts of fasting made this visceral fat even more resistant over time. So remember, when I talk about sugar burner, fat burner, I'm talking about making a switch so your body's burning energy from fat. And what we're also talking about, and that's fat everywhere, fat on your arms, fat on your hips, fat around your organs, your belly. This is what we're seeing dramatically shift. What this study is showing us, the positive of this study, is that when we fast the same way over and over and over again, that the visceral fat, the belly fat, becomes resistant to this fat burning energy system. So what do we know? What are we learning from these two studies? Okay, first, we're learning not to get caught into the headlines. So that's the first thing I want to say. Second, we're learning that when you fast too much, that there's a possibility that there could be a negative effect. Okay, well, what's fasting too much? I mean, most of us love our fasting lifestyle. We're doing it a lot. But I want to bring that fasting too much to a different discussion, which is you have to vary your fasts. So if you're doing one meal a day and you got great results with weight loss, and now all of a sudden you're gaining weight, especially around the belly, this study, the second study here, is telling you that you need to vary your fast. 24-hour fast one day, 13-hour fast the next day, no fast the third day. It needs to constantly change so that you don't fall into this challenge of the visceral fat becoming resistant to being burned for energy. So that's key, is we've got to vary our fasts. The second thing that we're learning is that when they talk about the muscle loss, I want to point out, and you can talk to any faster on this, that many times when we're in a fast or we're doing a fast, the muscles will shrink because you're in autophagy. And autophagy is made for detoxing and clearing out the junk out of your tissues. But if you stay in autophagy all the time and you don't work on some mTOR, which is how you actually build muscle, then yes, if I'm a fasting, intermittent fasting, and I'm really just staying in this place of only doing autophagy and only breaking down, over time, your muscle will break down too. But if you know that that the fast and what you break your fast with are a beautiful marriage in building a body that you want, you can start to go, okay, let me fast. And when I break my fast, let me stimulate mTOR with protein so I can build muscle. I teach this to my academy a lot, that we talk about how if you want to have lean muscle, you work out in a fasted state, and then when you're done with your workout, you eat a protein-rich meal. So you're in autophagy, you're working out to stimulate autophagy, and then you're replenishing mTOR. So we're back, both these studies are showing me that we're back at fasting variation. We're back at food is as important as fasting for weight loss, so is exercise. And we're back at don't fall prey to the sensational headlines. We've got to vary our fasts. We have to vary our foods. And if we do that, we get the benefits of fasting and the benefits of eating combined together. It's the perfect scenario.
Okay, you're not losing belly fat. I get it. Watch this video so you know exactly how to get rid of your belly fat. So I really want you to remember that cortisol and belly fat, those go hand in hand. So as your belly is growing, it's not always diet related. It can also be stress related.